Welcome to Conversations with Matt DeLockery. I want to take some time and talk about science and Christianity. These two worlds are often seen as being opposed to one another. But are they? Can you be a Christian and believe in science? Can you be a scientist and also be a Christian? I have lived a little bit in both worlds, though obviously more in the religious one. I did my undergrad at Georgia Tech, and I have a scientific mind, though that's not the career path I chose. While at Tech, I majored in business. Specifically, I focus on operations management, the part of business that focuses on how things actually work. From there, I went to seminary and earned my master's in divinity, and more recently, I finished my PhD in New Testament. So, for those of you who have listened to earlier series and heard that I was working on my PhD, I'm finished now. I defended at the end of March this year, 2018. I still look at things pretty much the same way as I did when I was at Tech. I want to know how things actually work. In other words, when you break it all down and get rid of the fluff, what's really there? In this series, we're basically going to do just that. We're going to break things down and look at how they work. When you get rid of the extra stuff in religion, specifically Christianity, because I'm a Christian and that's the religion I'm going to be focusing on, what is it really saying? When you boil down science, or more specifically, certain scientific claims, down to their essence, what are they saying? And can you put the two of these things together? Can you believe in both at the same time, or will your head explode? I'm not going to be trying to prove what is or is not true. I'm going to take the position, assuming every claim both science and Christianity make are true, can you believe in both at the same time, or do you have to choose? Now, I'm going to take a few weeks and go over some topics that I think will help us understand this issue and look at a little bit of the intersection of science and Christianity. But I am definitely coming at it from a more of a religion-heavy perspective. So, at the end of this series, I'm going to share with you 2 interviews with professional scientists who are also Christians and let them give you their perspective. So, be sure to stick around for those. Also, if you would like to look into this topic further, there's a book you should really check out called Where the Conflict Really Lies by Alvin Plantinga. I'll put a link to it in the description, and if you're interested in this topic, I would highly recommend you check it out. So, let's get going. The first thing we need to talk about is consistency. So what's that? Basically, we're asking, can you believe in 2 things at the same time without there being a contradiction? For example, I cannot believe that I am both 5'10" and not 5'10" at the same time without there being a contradiction, right? That actually violates a law of philosophy called the law of non-contradiction. Totally original name, huh? When we're talking about consistency, we basically want to know if it's possible to hold 2 beliefs at the same time without a contradiction showing up. So, if Christianity tells us that there is a God, and science tells us that there is not a God, then there's a contradiction. That means the 2 beliefs are not consistent. So what we're going to do is take a look at a couple of big examples and try to see if science and Christianity are consistent on them. Again, we're not asking whether these beliefs are true or not. We're asking whether there is inherent contradiction between science and Christianity on these particular issues. I think you'll see what I mean as we get going. Let's start with a simple example and then we'll get to a more difficult one. First up is the Big Bang Theory. The basic idea behind the Big Bang Theory is that a long time ago, about 13.8 billion years, give or take a few, the universe exploded into being. With the Big Bang, all time, space, and matter came into existence. And the universe looks the way it does today because we're looking at the effects of that initial bang. Now, this has caused a lot of pushback among some Christians. Some Christians believe that God created the universe 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, and immediately it looks like we have a problem. So, let's talk about consistency. Is the Big Bang Theory consistent with the belief that God created the universe 6,000 to 10,000 years ago? No, it is not. These two contradict each other. The universe cannot be 13.8 billion years old and 6,000 to 10,000 years old at the same time. However, we haven't really arrived at an answer yet because all we've done is say that the Big Bang Theory is inconsistent with a particular form of Christianity. What we need to ask next is this particular belief essential to Christianity? Is the idea that the earth is young so essential to Christianity that you cannot be a Christian without it? The answer to that question is no. There are many forms of Orthodox Christianity which believe in an old earth. So it is possible to be a Christian and believe in an old earth. That means that the Big Bang Theory and Christianity are consistent in general, even though the Big Bang Theory is not consistent with a particular form of Christianity that believes in a young universe. The other question we need to ask about the Big Bang Theory is about God. Can you believe in both the Big Bang and God? If you can't believe in both of them, then we obviously have found an inconsistency. The question that one would need to ask is, could God have been responsible for the Big Bang Theory? Pay attention to the way I'm asking the question. I said, could God have been responsible, not was God responsible? The second question is a much larger question, which I plan to talk about, but that'll take an entire series all by itself. Right now we're looking at consistency, so we're only talking about possibilities. We're not talking about what actually happened. So, back to the question, could God have been responsible for the Big Bang Theory? To my understanding, I don't think science could say that God could not have been responsible for it. Science can only look so far back into the past. As of the time of this episode, the farthest back physics can go is 1 Planck time after the beginning of the universe, approximately 10 to the negative 43rd seconds. Even though it's really cool that we can know something that far back, which it is, it tells us nothing about whether there was anything that caused the bang or whether there's anything outside the universe. This area is where philosophy and religion explore. So, believing that the Big Bang happened does not rule out God. Whether it points towards or away from God is another question entirely. But again, that goes beyond where I want to go with this episode. All we're asking is whether one can believe in the Big Bang Theory and Christianity at the same time. What we have seen is that it's possible to be a Christian and also believe that the universe is old. And I have argued that believing in the Big Bang Theory does not necessarily mean that there is no God. What this means is that the Big Bang Theory and Christianity are compatible. Just because you believe in one does not necessarily mean you cannot believe in the other. Are you following me? Do you get how this consistency thing works? We're not actually trying to find out what's true. We're just trying to figure out whether it's possible to believe two things at once without a contradiction. So, now we've looked at an easy one, let's tackle another issue that is much more contentious: evolution. Is evolution consistent with Christianity? First thing, remember, we're talking about consistency. We're not asking whether any of this is true or not. We're not asking whether evolution happened. We're not asking whether Christianity is true or not. Both are interesting questions, but all we're doing right now is asking whether or not you can believe in both at the same time. Okay, so first things first, what is evolution? I'm going to make a list of 6 things, and we'll talk about what is evolution and what is not. This list comes from the book by Plantinga I mentioned earlier. Again, I highly recommend you check it out. There's a link in the description. Here we go. Number 1, the Earth is old. Number 2, life has progressed from simple to complex, from single-celled organisms to multi-celled organisms, and so on and so forth. Number 3, there is descent with modification, meaning that offspring differ a little from their parents. Number 4, there is common ancestry. Every life form on Earth is a distant cousin to every other life form. Number 5, a naturalistic mechanism drives the process of descent with modification. Usually this is thought to be natural selection operating on random genetic mutations. And number 6, life developed from non-life without God. It came about just by virtue of the ordinary laws of physics and chemistry. Now, according to Plantinga, the first 4 of these are evolution, number 5 is Darwinism, and number 6 isn't part of the theory of evolution at all. Why does he say that? Well, the first 4 describe what is actually supposed to have happened. It's talking about the history of what happened on Earth. The Earth being old, life progressing from simple to complex, descent with modification, and common ancestry really just describe what evolution is. Number 5, Natural selection, operating on random genetic mutations, or Darwinism, doesn't describe what happens, it describes how it happened. This is the way Darwin thought evolution worked. It is a mechanism. It's a way to get from A to B. You see, the mechanism could be wrong, but evolution still could have happened. There could be another way that numbers 1 through 4 happened, only without happening by natural selection operating on random genetic mutations. And in that case, evolution would still have happened, even if Darwinism would be, in this hypothetical scenario, false. So the mechanism is separate from the thing itself. Finally, number 6, life developed from non-life without God. This isn't evolution at all, this is naturalism. This is a philosophical viewpoint that says that everything that happens in the world is a result of purely natural causes. In other words, there is no supernatural intervention. Of course, this isn't a scientific theory, unless science has come up with some new methods that allow for testing for things outside of the natural realm. To my knowledge, it hasn't done that. So, this remains a philosophical point of view that an individual scientist might hold, and many in the scientific community do, but it's not actual science, it's philosophy. So hopefully we've laid enough groundwork that we can actually get to what we need to talk about. Is evolution consistent with Christianity? Let's run back through our 6 points, or rather our 3 sections, since we divided it up into 3 categories, and see what happens. First up, evolution. Is Christianity consistent with numbers 1 through 4? An old earth, life progressing from simple to complex, descent with modification, and common ancestry. To answer this more clearly, let's take a statement that's acceptable to Christianity and see if it works with these points. How about the statement, God intended to create creatures of a certain kind and then acted in such a way as to accomplish this intention? I would argue that this is a statement that stays within the bounds of Orthodox Christianity and captures the basic idea behind creation, even if some groups would argue that it's not the correct interpretation of Genesis. So, does this work with numbers 1 through 4? I think it does. There is nothing in the earth being old, life progressing from simple to complex, descent with modification, or common ancestry that in any way comes into conflict with God intending to create creatures of a certain kind and then acting in such a way as to accomplish that intention. Numbers 1 through 4 describe what happened, and the statement we made only says that there was an agent behind it all. So what about number 5? Natural selection operating on random genetic mutations, or Darwinism. Most people get hung up on the word random. However, random doesn't mean what most people think it does. It has a very specific and technical use here. Random here really means that the mutations that occur in an organism are not determined ahead of time by the needs of an organism or what would be beneficial in a given environment. In other words, this just means that there is no physical mechanism in or outside organisms that detects which mutations would be beneficial and causes them to occur. So this would actually be compatible with God causing the mutations, since God is not a physical mechanism. Another way to put this is that we're talking about these mutations being biologically random rather than philosophically random. In other words, by saying that these mutations are random, the scientist is not making a statement about agency. There is no statement being made about whether a God might have been involved or not. Now, many scientists also believe that God is not involved and that these mutations are philosophically random as well. However, this is a philosophical add-on to the scientific data. And really, this gets into the final issue, number 6. So, just to be clear, whether God actually caused such mutations to occur or not is another question. We're just talking hypotheticals. All I'm trying to say is that God's involvement is not ruled out by saying that natural selection is operating on random genetic mutations. It would still be possible to say that God intended to create creatures of a certain kind and then acted in such a way as to accomplish this intention. Therefore, I think number 5 is still consistent with Christianity. Again, whether God was involved or not is another question. Finally, we come to number 6. Life developed from non-life without God. This is not consistent with Christianity. This statement makes the claim that evolution is unguided. All views of Genesis and other passages make it clear that God created all things. To say he did not is inconsistent with Christianity. Really, what all this comes down to is the difference between that and how. The Bible is very clear that God created everything, but doesn't really say very much, if anything, on how He created it. As such, how is an open question. That means we Christians shouldn't feel any qualms about being open to whatever the evidence says. Though I would argue further that we should actually be open to all evidence, even if it looks like it's going to say that our beliefs are wrong, because if we're wrong, we should want to know. And that really goes for everyone, not just Christians. If you're really seeking the truth, then you must be open to being corrected. You must be able to honestly say, if I am wrong, then I would want to know. Now, I know we've been going through some issues that get a lot of us really worked up. That was the point. I wanted to dive into some topics that are really difficult to talk about. Hopefully, though, understanding what consistency is will help us have more intelligent and rational discussions. Quite often, a lot of us get really upset about these sorts of things, many times because we think they contradict our worldview. However, when you start regularly asking the question, is X consistent with my beliefs, you may find that not as many things are in conflict as you once thought. This will enable you not to get hung up on all the little things, and it will help you focus more of your mental powers on the big stuff. It will also make it easier to keep an open mind about things so that you can freely ask the question, what is true? Listen to the little things with interest, but don't get upset about them. Put your effort into the big questions. Focus your intelligence and powers of reasoning on them, but still do it with an open mind. Because if you don't have an open mind, you're not really looking for answers. You're assuming that you already know it all, and that's not going to help you or anybody else. I hope this discussion of consistency has been helpful. Next week, we're going to talk about miracles. Has science proven that miracles cannot happen?